Philadelphia 76ers have done it. All this pain of this brutal season, the worst of my entire lifetime, is worth it. The Sixers have kept the number 3 overall pick, and we have life in this franchise. It was an incredible experience at the lottery. Shout out to Jared McCain for representing this Sixers team up there. Took us down to the wire. We had ESPN throwing us off the whole deal, but the bottom line is this team keeps the pick, and we have some hope from here. So I want to throw it to you, Jacob Moreno, right off the back, and look at our guy, Jared McCain, representing up there. The good luck charm that this franchise needed, not having any of that Sixers curse infecting him just yet. And as he mentioned, he manifested this. So what did we have to worry about? So Jacob, I want to start right with last night here. What was your experience watching things go down? What were you feeling in that moment as sort of the countdown was going on? And overall, take me through your night.
I think the first thing is I just feel so relieved and revived because the Sixers, the front office, the fans alike, we all needed good news. We all needed a good storyline after so many crazy things, injuries, losses, controversial subplots, controversy surrounding the big three. It was great to just have a win.
Yeah.
And I think that's the biggest thing. But yeah, yesterday I went to the PHLY Sports' draft lottery
Shout
party. It
out.
was a great experience. Got to meet Cal Newbeck, Derek Bonner, Devon Givens, Rich Hoffman. Just really good, great group of people. Obviously, been looking up to those guys for a minute now. But also, I really got to meet the community. And, as writers, as reporters, supposed to be objective, but it was cool to kind of, tap into my fandom side a little bit. But during the actual event, there was, as I'm sure, a lot of fans and reporters and all that. There was anxiousness, just mind running a million miles a minute. And it seemed with every single pick, things got more nerve wracking, especially I think after the first few picks, stuff started to fall off the beaten path a little bit. Like the Sixers were in grave danger of losing that pick.
Yeah.
But once they got in the top four, I mean, the rep, my heart was able to just relax because I felt my heartbeat, I felt my upper chest tensing up. But no, it was great. Just yeah, I mean, a great experience, and just so happy it worked out. Just relief.
Yeah, 100% there. For a season absolutely littered with losses, it was nice to have a win. And I'm fully with you that it kind of woke up the fandom and I think everybody here because it was a season that there was essentially almost nothing to root for. That we kind of knew the state of the season once it went off the rails with the injuries to Joel Embiid, with Paul George battling, and of course Tyrese Maxey. You can go down the list. Jared McCain himself being added to that, and just having like a little bit of life feels awesome now. So there are better days ahead, and I do want to remind you guys, as always, to make sure you are hitting the subscribe button. We will have some better news, and we're ready to tap into all of it. So at this current point, only 38.4% of you guys watching these videos. Let's get this Sixers Digest family continuing to grow. And as myself personally was watching the Rice to Ricky Sanchez watch party there, which was incredible. That moment where we realized the pick was kept, where we got down to the bottom 6, was absolutely electric and made it all worth it to me. Were you thrown off at all by the ESPN broadcasting saying that the Sixers lost the pick? There was kind of like a puzzled murmur, and shout out to, once again, the Rice Ricky Sanchez. They had a nice like explainer breaking down what we're looking for, what teams. So there was kind of this disconnect of like, wait a minute, no, we didn't lose it yet. What's he saying? But nonetheless, over the loudspeakers, Kevin Nagandi, shout out to him. Do like him overall, even though he did make a kind of a mistake here pretty significantly. But what was going through your mind as that happened?
First of all, it's kind of even funny that Kevin Nagani did that because he went to Temple. He's
Yeah,
a
he's
Philly
Philly
guy,
guy.
which just made it that much funnier. But to be completely honest, I didn't even hear it. Like I was so focused on getting the content out, getting the article ready, and the sound wasn't too high because everyone was just screaming and like anxious. But no, it was kind of funny to see the aftermath of that, to see so many fans just completely shook up. But I think just kind of go back to the first question. I think once they got into that top four, there was really just a sense of hype and excitement like that we just have not seen for almost a year. Like I
Yeah.
think it was probably even bigger than when they signed Paul George. Like it was just universal excitement, and it really just gives something for fans to be excited about, which is just the biggest thing.
Yeah, and to just throw a reminder on the odds that we were facing here. The breakdown, there was about a 64% chance of the Sixers retaining their pick there, a 10.5% chance at 1, a 10.5% chance at that 2 pick, 10.6% chance at that 3 pick, which ended up being exactly what happened, 10.5 at 4, 2.2 at the 5th pick there, and 19.6 at that 6th pick before the rest dropped off the map. That biggest chunk, that 26.7% at that 7th pick. We don't have to live with that reality reality because the Sixers got the third pick there. Now, I won't lie. I entered the night with the mindset a win to me is considered just retaining the draft pick. If they have possession, have a chance to bring in a young talent, that would be a win. Once we got to the stage where it was the final four, I got Cooper flag fever that I was waiting for it. And even though I'm
Me
still
too.
thrilled right now, I was feeling it in the moment. You were in the same boat there?
100%. Yeah. Especially when the Hornets got the fourth pick, I thought it was really going to happen for a split second.
Yep, and it does feel like this draft now kind of starts at the Sixers. That we all know the Cooper flag is the universal number one. That is no secret there, unless Nico Harrison wants to pull a rabbit out of his hat and wheel and deal or make something. I'm not going to take anything off the table when it does come to Nico Harrison because he's made far crazier decisions than would be doing something different here. But it does feel that is the universal pick and has been for quite some time. And Dylan Harper does seem to be a guy that is pretty concretely this number two prospect there. It will be interesting. I do think San Antonio has the ammunition if they want to make some sort of big time trade. There are going to be some big names on the market this summer when we talk about Kevin Durant, Giannis. Now the Celtics have kind of an interesting decision coming up, so they could potentially take a swing there. But the bottom line is I think only a team making that trade will be looking for Dylan Harper also, and then we get to the 3 pick where the Sixers do stand here. So when looking at things, sort of the consensus, I don't even want to say consensus. Let's not go there. Where's your head at on what is the best usage of this third pick overall? Where do you want to start with this, Jacob?
I think, first off, I want to say I haven't done deep research in every single one of these prospects. So my answer on this could look very different in literally a week from now. But I think my early thoughts, I was able to do some digging on Ace Bailey today. And I think that if Dylan Harper is off the board, if the Spurs do pick him, I think Bailey is the way to go. I think VJ Edgecombe is also a very honorable mention. He has great upside, arguably probably one of the best two-way guards in this class. But I think if you're kind of going off need and upside, I think Ace Bailey is definitely the guy because I've seen a lot of comparisons to Kevin Durant, and that's just not true. I think he's definitely more of a Michael Porter Jr. type of guy, someone who can kind of catch fire. The defensive upside's there, shot making handle, a lot of work. He's a very raw prospect on
Yeah.
both ends, but when he does develop, that's also another issue is that I think he is 18 years old, so he doesn't quite fit the timeline as much as like a Cooper Flag, someone with a more complete skill set does. But if you're really talking upside, then Ace has a lot of potential. And the Sixers really have never had in the Embiid era, at least, like a dynamic shot making wing like this. I think it'll be a very interesting addition to the team. And I even said on Twitter, like, if you get Ace, he has potential to be the most dynamic, like 3 level scoring wing since Julius Irving. That's how long it has
Yeah.
been since the Sixers have had a versatile wing like this.
Yeah, 100% there. And I will tip my hat a little bit that I am an Ace Bailey guy as well. We'll dive a little bit deeper into all the prospects, but to kind of make the sales pitch right there, I think there's a lot untapped in this dude that when you think about sort of the pathway for prospects nowadays, it's pretty clear that these guys are, handpicked and identified pretty early in their years. They go to a prep school, they get that, go to a prestigious college and enter the draft in an NIL era. Things are a little different. For Ace Bailey specifically here, he spent 4 years at public school in college and then went to Rutgers, which is not by any means considered this top tier basketball school. And obviously we saw the results last year that even with having Dylan Harper and Ace Bailey on the team together, they did not even qualify for the tournament. And with all due respect to both those guys, not a lot of talent beyond them on the roster. And I do think there are fair coaching critiques. To me, my takeaway here, I think there's a real world where Ace Bailey has really never been coached to the level that his talent deserves. And that's really appealing to me. I think there's untapped potential for what he can be. And a lot of kind of the mistakes in his game are pretty fixable in my mind. The shot selection is something that absolutely needs to cleaned up, but that's such an easy fix there. It's just don't take as many contested twos, man. We can work through what your shot diet looked like. The raw athleticism absolutely pops, and I did get a chance to go up and watch a game in Rutgers in person there, and I walked away with my biggest takeaway of that entire day. This Ace Bailey kid cares about basketball. His motor popped off the charts to me, and that was something that I kind of entered the day as a little bit of a skeptic to Bailey. So I'm very grateful that I did get a chance to see him in person there. Now, before we dive a little bit deeper into the prospect conversation, there is this case to be made about trading the draft pick here. Now, we know the Sixers are sort of in this middle ground. They obviously are still committed to Joel Embiid and Paul George, both those guys under contract for a little bit there. They still have this young kind of upcoming talent. Jared McCain had an unbelievable rookie season in the brief stint that we did have it. Tyrese Maxey, 24 years old, still a lot of really positive years ahead of him. So when we get into the trade the pick conversations, where is your head at on that side of things, Jacob?
I think it's a really interesting conversation, but I'm really yet to find a realistic option. I think there are a few teams who would definitely want to trade up, the Utah Jazz, the Brooklyn Nets, and the New Orleans Pelicans. But I think out of those three, the Nets is definitely the most realistic
Yeah,
option just because of two things.
draft
One,
picks.
Jake Fisher mentioned that they're going to be a team that wants to trade up because, their whole mission was to tank and get the first overall pick. They got the eighth. I mean, imagine how you're feeling as a Nets fan. But
And the
another reason
Jazz,
is
man, and the Wizards. Like, I do have sympathy for these bottom
it's
tier
crazy.
tankers, man. Brutal break.
Mhm. Then another reason is they roster Cam Johnson. And if you want to know anything about Cam Johnson, you know he is a perfect fit on any team with championship aspirations. And the Sixers will be lucky to have him. So I think if there is a scenario where they want to trade, I think a framework with Cam Johnson, the third overall pick, which obviously belongs to the Sixers, for Cam Johnson and the eighth overall pick. So I think there's definitely something there. I saw that, funny enough, Kelly Oubre, Andre Drummond, and Eric Gordon's player options actually total up to
Wow.
Cam Johnson's salary. So it's something there, but I think obviously the draft comes before that. So we'll see. But I think my final verdict would be that, at three, you have a chance to acquire a player who can help you in the short and long term.
Yeah.
And building a core around Maxey, McCain, Edwards, Zabona, it's so important. So if you can get a guy like Dylan Harper or Ace Bailey, you can't mess that up, especially with the uncertainty regarding Joel Embiid and Paul George. So my stance right now is to keep the pick and just keep adding on that youthful talent.
Yeah, and if we know anything about Daryl Morey, he will not leave any stone unearthed there, that he will explore every option. And I certainly get the case of trading down if you can add picks, add a key player like a Cam Johnson, as you mentioned there. My whole opinion here is they have to walk away with some sort of young talent. And sort of the case for doing that sort of dance here, I don't think that there is this massive drop off, as I sort of mentioned in the beginning. There's a clear cut top two in my mind, and then I think you can make a case for a couple guys here. And I do want to dive into shout out to everybody getting involved in the chat. Austin O'Neill, a big Jeremiah Fears fan out there. We got some VJ Edgecombe fans in the chat as well. So I'm going to touch on each of those guys as well. But I did also want to point out like what is being said by the guys making the decisions at this point. So to reflect on a couple things that we do know at this point, again, I do have the lottery odds here, but Nick Nurse joined the Mike Gill show. Shout out to Mike Gill on 97.3 here. And he was asked, and his quote was, everyone knows who's going number one. And then we got one team that can pick one of the two other guys that we want. So we have a couple of players available to choose from, and we're in good shape. What was your takeaway reading this, Jacob? I think I have a little bit different than the consensus. It does seem to be like they're speaking about three guys here. I think Nurse was speaking a little bit more openly on like, there's only two teams in front of us that can kind of take off our wish list. I don't know if he necessarily meant like we're looking at three players, but is that how you took it or you feel differently?
I think I can definitely see where you're coming from, but I think initially, like everybody else, I was kind
Yeah,
of surprised with how seemingly bold this quote was. I think if you really take it at face value, obviously he's talking about Cooper Flag, Ace Bailey, and Dylan Harper. And after a season where so many things have been, you know, uncertain, I actually really appreciate the clarity.
sure.
But no, I think obviously that those three are definitely on their big board. I mean, obviously they should be. So I think, the fact that they're on their radar and the fact that Dylan Harper, Ace Bailey could very well become a Sixer, it's a good thing. And I appreciate, Nick Nurse. And obviously I think you're probably going to show Daryl Morey that they're being, pretty open about their draft process.
Yeah, 100%. And as you mentioned, to take a look on what Daryl Morey said, this on 97.5 The Fanatic here, he was asked about if they plan to select a player with the third pick, and his quote was, yeah, that's the plan, to get a high upside player that we also think can contribute right away in a big deal, and we feel like the pick 3 is a great spot to be in. Now, when speaking about sort of the context of these Sixers draft picks, obviously we've lived through the Joel Embiid era for quite some time. My full stance has been the Tyrese Maxey selection extended the window to win with Joel Embiid. That kept that open by having another guy. The Jared McCain pick arguably created a whole nother window to win beyond this. This sort of is this chance to do the two timelines thing where you can add a guy that if worse comes to worse, and I hope we're not living in this world, but there is a chance that Joel Embiid never returns to the player that he once was. You now have three key building blocks to move forward with, and Paul George still kicking around to this point. So I do think it's very important that they walk away with a high-level rookie here. I can get the concept of moving down a couple picks. I still lean towards I'd prefer to pick at 3, but I do think, like, do you agree with me in that sense that they absolutely need to walk away with, like, a guy that you could look at, I don't want to say as a foundational piece, but a key, like, next up generation type player moving forward?
No, yeah, I agree. I think that's also another interesting thought if the Sixers were to trade down, that the fact that they would still have a relatively high pick, whether that's with the Jazz or the Nets, because if you get the Jazz pick, you can get a guy like Khan, or if you go get the Brooklyn 8th overall pick in that hypothetical Cam Johnson deal we kicked around. You can get a guy like Jeremiah Fears if he's available. Come on, Malawach, Colin Murray Boyle. So there's definitely a lot of options there from pick 1 to pick 14. But I do want to add two more Daryl Morey gems.
Sure.
The first is that in that same call with 97.5, he said that if the best player available at 3 is a guard, they're going to pick him. So if Dylan Harper or maybe even VJ Edgecombe, who knows, is available, then they could become Sixers. And last week on the Rice to Ricky Sanchez pod, he did say that if they didn't get the first overall pick, that they could explore trading up, down, and whatever. So obviously, if you've kept up with, like I've said in my article just now, if you kept up with the NBA for an extended period of time, you know you can never take the words of GMs at face value because
Sure.
obviously Daryl Morey won't say that they're going to trade the pick publicly because that would just bring the value down and just completely unnecessary. But we'll see. I mean, obviously there is a world where whether the Sixers trade up or keep it, I think there could be good outcomes on both sides. But I think we both kind of lean towards the fact that they have to come up with something here.
Yeah, 100%. And to sort of set the stage for the multi-year look at this Sixers team, we understand that this is a page turn on what was a brutal season, but there is going to be a lot of this core coming back. And we do have to acknowledge that being a key part of this entire conversation. Joel Embiid still under contract for a significant period of time. Paul George, this built continuity has been a key factor of what they wanted to build around, and this is a chance to sort of move forward with that. Obviously, last season was a disaster, but it did feel like everything that could go wrong did go wrong. That I do think that there's a chance that just running it back, and I understand that's not exactly what we're doing as the third pick, is a significant difference there. There is a much different outcome for how this season goes. Now, as far as the guard conversation, I could not be higher on Jared McCain, to be perfectly honest. That I know we don't have to make this decision here, but if it comes down to I'm buying stock in out of Tyrese Maxey and Jared McCain, we zoom ahead 15 years to when these guys conclude their careers. I think there's a real world where Jared McCain ends up the better overall basketball player. The off-ball movement, I think, opens up in this Sixers offense in a way that and by the way, this is not me saying to choose whatsoever. I want these guys to play together and do very much believe they can be very successful playing together. Where the conversation does start to get interesting is bringing another guard in that mix, and let's not forget Quentin Grimes, by all indications, and Daryl Morey, been far more open about this than I even expected, seems to believe that Quentin Grimes will be back in a Sixers uniform. Now, I don't think he would have made that deal at the deadline if he did not expect and believe that to be the case. He is a restricted free agent, and the Sixers in really good standing from a cap situation, and really just him being a restricted free agent, of having the chance to retain him here. But let's walk through the world where Dylan Harper does not go off the board at 2. Would you have any pause to bring him in because of this guard duo, or do you think that there is a world where all three of those guys can coexist?
I think it's an interesting debate to kind of take it back to the Tyrese Maxey and Jared McCain thing.
Mm-hmm.
I think Jared McCain only played 23 games, but like you said, in those games, he showed tremendous upside to just be this offensive engine that Tyrese Maxey somewhat really hasn't proven to be. I think more specifically playmaking, Jared
Sure.
McCain in those 23 games has shown a much better playmaking feel than Tyrese Maxey has. Like he looks more comfortable, collapsing the defense off pick and rolls and kind of launching a skip pass, stops the corner. And Tyrese Maxey, to his defense, has grown as a playmaker, especially in the 23-24 season, but he really hasn't really shown that potential of making those advanced reads. Like he's made more simple reads. So I think in terms of, offense and variety and playmaking, I think Jared McCain's definitely shown more of that. But it really is an interesting situation, especially with Quentin Grimes. I think there's just so many different debates here. Like, even if the Sixers don't draft a guard, who starts, Quentin Grimes or Jared McCain? I think on that end, I would go Grimes at first, just kind of ease McCain back into it, let him,
Sure.
run the offense as a six man. And, obviously Grimes is a better two-way skill set, fit better alongside Maxey, but we'll see. Maybe it'll be like a D'Anthony Melton situation.
Yeah.
What a throwback. But another interesting situation, like you said, is if they draft Dylan Harper or VJ Edgecombe, because there you have obviously a guard with insane upside who you want to really get acclimated to the NBA, who you want to give a big role. But is it worth, giving him a starter role over McCain or Grimes? So it really is a difficult situation. I wish I had the answer right now, but like I think I'll definitely have a more clearer answer depending on if they get a guard and who it is.
Yeah, and just to kind of put my position out there, I do think the three could coexist. It's not ideal, but I mean Harper does have good size, about 6'5" there. I think he's a little better off ball than he gets credit. Like I've seen some of the James Harden comparisons for him, which I don't fully see there. Harden for
No, he's
sure.
a very good cutter. Yeah.
Yeah, like there is an off-ball cutting that James Harden certainly does not do there, and I also don't think Harper is nearly close to the passer that Harden was. Now, to be fair, Harden was not the passer that he currently is when he first came in the NBA, and I think that's an important message to be clear here, none of these guys are finished products. The Ace Bailey critics out there, and I do think that is the most polarizing draft prospect that maybe I can remember. He will look like a much different player when you fast forward 5 years from now, and that is the case with all these guys. They're going to add layers. They're going to find ways to get better, all these type of conversations. But for Harper specifically, I do think there's more off ball than he gets credit. He's not a zero when he doesn't have it, and that's really intriguing to me. And I think especially necessary if you are going to play these ball dominant names. And I did want to reflect on Tyrese Maxey real quick. I think he's had a worse reputation for last season than he deserves. It was a weird season by all accounts there. He obviously didn't start the year great, and then he dealt with injuries near the end. There was that mid-stretch where he looked like every bit of the all-star guard that we believe him to be and expect him to be moving forward. And to me, the biggest storyline from a positive for Tyrese Maxey, he took a massive step forward defensively last year, and that's something that I think opens up a little bit of this lineup versatility, which is a huge deal moving forward. Now, let's put the Harper conversations to the side. Let's act like things do go according to plan, that off the board, Cooper Flag goes to the Dallas Mavericks, Dylan Harper goes to the San Antonio Spurs, and then the Sixers are on the clock. Now, we both kind of made the case for Ace Bailey. To just hit on this a little bit more, I think it's a dangerous game in today's NBA whenever you're passing up a wing with this type of skill set that he does have. As you mentioned, the Sixers have not had a ton of that. They've taken some strides in that direction. Kelly Oubre fits some of those boxes there. Paul George theoretically should be everything that Ace Bailey could become in a best case scenario there, and he obviously has a ton to work on and polish and all those type of conversations. Justin Edwards, I think, is a huge step in that right direction as far as optionality for this. But do you put a little bit of value on the position that he plays as far as having wings? And I mean, you look around the NBA, look at the success that the New York Knicks are having with OG Anunoby, Mikal Bridges, the Boston Celtics with Jason Tatum and Jaylen Brown. Does that sway your opinion, or are you continuing to look at this, as Daryl Morey has indicated, purely on a prospect-by-prospect basis?
I think you just have to draft the best player possible because I'm thinking more of a lens of talent in a world without Joel Embiid or Paul George. Because in a situation like that, you want to have the best group of talent available, even if it is a little bit of overflow in one department, like we were talking about with the guards. But yeah, I think it's an interesting debate. But I also did want to touch on Harper real quick. I
Sure.
think, especially when it comes to this and drafting a guard, is he has a very, very high ceiling, or not ceiling, I'm sorry, a very high floor. And we've talked about Ace Bailey having a high ceiling, but I think it's also important to have a high floor because Dylan Harper, I think at the very least, will be a very quality, starting caliber guard who can create offense, move off the ball, attack the rim. I think for him specifically, the biggest thing is his perimeter shot. That'll really determine his role, especially in his first few, seasons in the NBA. But no, I think obviously you just have to, get the best talent available. And maybe that's just me being traumatized from the Sixers drafting Nerlens Noel, Joel Embiid, and Okafor
Shout out.
3 years in a row. But no, I think just, getting all the talent you possibly can just to make, the inevitable era switch that much easier.
Yeah, 100% there. And we have kind of danced around him a little bit. The next guy on this list is obviously VJ Edgecombe. And I do think when push comes to shove and the dust does settle on this draft, that is essentially what I believe the decision is going to come down to. That it is going to be between Ace Bailey and VJ Edgecombe. Who knows? Still a long time to debate each of these guys. But Edgecombe specifically, you mentioned DeAnthony Melton earlier. I think my player comp for Edgecombe would kind of be a supercharged DeAnthony Melton there. And when you watch him move, that's the number one thing that stands out. He's got some Anthony Edwards in just his movement and athleticism there. The critiques that I would give for Edgecombe here, number one, when talking about this whole fit thing, that I do think he's more of a wing guard, like a 3/2 versus Bailey is a 3/4 is sort of the way that I see them grading out positionally here. But as you mentioned, it should be best prospect available. I do think he's a little bit of an athlete who's learning to play basketball. That is true of a lot of these guys, and Bailey, you can certainly push back at me and throw that as well. The good side to Edgecombe is when you talk about floor, I do think he has this, that I do think that there's a much stronger case for I know what he's going to be. And like at worst, he's a guy that you like, he's not going to be somebody you invest in and you lose on that. Like if it isn't working out in Philadelphia, I think you fast forward 3 years from now and VJ Edgecombe's still a pretty attractive trade guy that you can toss in a piece there. How do you feel about Edgecombe both as a prospect and what he would mean to the Sixers team?
I think exactly what you said, but another, intriguing part is, like you said, he could potentially play some small forward in some occasions. Obviously, I think you'd have to have more size in the front court for that to work. But the fact that he can play shooting guard and small forward just makes him really that much more valuable. And I saw actually an interesting TikTok earlier today where it kind of compared him to like the Thompson
Thompson, I
twins
did see
as
that.
like an adopted brother. And I think that's a great comparison because you look at the athleticism, the verticality. I think if you've seen any of his draft combine videos today, it's crazy. Like there was this one where he did a crazy vert without even stretching, I don't think. So when you have an athlete like that with just insane two-way potential and just a solid floor, like you said, it's hard to pass up, and that's what makes the debate so interesting. So I think if the Sixers did hypothetically choose VJ over Ace, I wouldn't necessarily be mad at all because this guy is, like I said earlier, one of the best two-way guards in this draft, and he also has a very good spot-up game, which I don't think a lot of people really realize because the athleticism is just that good. So if you're in a situation where you have him, Jared McCain, Tyrese Maxey, you are set up beautifully because that is could be a lineup because you could have Maxey at the one or McCain at the one, Maxey at the two, and BJ at the three, and definitely be a very young, athletic, and dynamic lineup, which is what Daryl Morey is looking for.
Yeah, no, 100% there. And probably already a better shooter than either of the Thompson twins. Actually, definitely better shooter than either one of the Thompson twins. With that said, there, I don't think he quite reaches the level of defense that either one of these guys, and Amon specifically, I believe will be the best defender in the NBA in the not too distant future here. So I get the case there overall. So I did think that was an interesting kind of point in that TikTok there, comparing them there. VJ, I would not be mad about whatsoever. I also would put out the point, I think he's a little bit more of a Daryl Morey guy, that when you think about what Daryl targets in a prospect, he does tend to fall in love with like the stat sheet stuffers there, the guy that's do a little bit of it all. Ace Bailey, to compare, there will be nights where Ace Bailey has 27 points, 0 assists, and 2 rebounds there. Like that's kind of Ace, and I do think he'll end up a better rebounder than he currently is, and his frame certainly has some to do with that I think he will fill out over time. Certainly very skinny and lanky at this point in the game, and I think that the NBA physicality, we saw these guys work up there. But VJ specifically impacts the game in a lot of ways. He had more offensive rebounds this year than Bailey directly, that he is a little bit better, certainly better of a playmaker. So it would not shock me in Daryl Morey's brain if he prefers VJ here. Now, to take out those two out of the equation, do you have a guy that you would bring up next? To take a look at the Tankathon mock draft, they have Trey Johnson. I do have some strong feelings about Trey Johnson, so we will get to that in a minute. But Jacob, would you have a guy that you go beyond these two that would be your next best prospect?
Not necessarily that I would draft at three, but I think, if I think fourth in my big board, obviously I still have to do some more research, but I think Concanipple has been a
Okay.
guy that has grown on me a lot. At first, I wasn't too high on him just because of, the mediocre athleticism, especially, in a league that has such athletic wings. But I think just him being such a dynamic player, similar to Jared McCain, but obviously taller, a guy who can, go cook off the ball, be a movement shooter, a secondary playmaker. I think defensively he'll have to make a little bit of improvements, but he's shown some promise there. So just kind of an all-around wing. Just you obviously, you can never have enough of those. I think overall, yeah, him definitely. If the Sixers trade back, kind of like we talked
Yeah.
about, I think, guys like Malawach, Colin Murray, Boyles will be intriguing. Like we said, this lottery is really stacked with talent, and you really, for the most part, you really can't go wrong anywhere.
Yeah, and we do hope that is not the case there. I do want to hit on each of these guys a little bit. Con, you mentioned there, and to pull up some of these per 36 stats, you can kind of look at them on the screen. Currently, they have Con where we slated at number 6 to the Wizards there. Con to me is the case for the high floor, which you currently made. I don't see any world in which Con Knipple is not a 10 plus year NBA player. Now, with that being said, I also don't see much of a world in which he is a number 1 or number 2 or probably even number 3 best player on a contending team here. I think he's going to be a very good connective passer, a winning player, not a high usage. He's a very smart player, moves off ball very well, but I don't think there's as much untapped with him. I think he is the closest thing to a finished product of each of these guys that we do see in this draft. Now, with that being said, that's a pretty good finished product. Again, a guy that I very much believe in will be a significant high-level NBA player for the foreseeable future, but I would not touch him near the 3rd pick there. That only comes into play in my end if it is a move down situation. To hit on a couple others, so Trey Johnson, a popular name. He's very much, I would say, from the Hooper-pilled crowd there. Obviously, he broke some of the Kevin Durant scoring records at Texas, which in itself is a crazy accomplishment. I think that is the guy with the widest range in this entire draft of the floor and ceiling. There's a world where Trey Johnson, and he is an absolute bucket, there's no doubt about it. There's a world where Trey Johnson reaches his fullest potential, where that is a guy who's a multi-time All-Star, leading the team in scoring on a contender there. I also think there's a world where he ends up in the wrong situation, and he's borderline out of the NBA. I think there's that much of a range with Trey Trey Johnson. My ideal spot with him, and it will not happen with the 2 pick. They'll have to move around a little bit. I would love to see him in San Antonio, where you have a guy like Victor Wembanyama behind him being that sort of defensive anchor there. I don't want to see him in a place like Charlotte, where my worst fears, I think, could come true as far as what turns out. So I think where he lands is going to be very kind of direct to where Trey Johnson's overall NBA outlook looks. But what is your kind of feelings on Trey Johnson? Any strong takes there?
I think you bring up a great point with Charlotte because you look at how poorly Malik Monk played there, and his career kind of got revitalized with the Lakers, then Sacramento. We also have James Bouknight for
Yeah.
on and off court reasons. I believe is he in the G League? Is he overseas? He's not
Uh,
in the NBA, but
I believe G League still. I think he's still kicking around a little
G
bit.
League.
Yeah.
Gotcha. But yeah, that's a great point about the Hornets. But no, Trey Johnson has to do a little more digging on him, but he really is the archetype, like you said, of a pure bucket getter. Now, I don't think I'd draft him at 3, but if the Sixers were in a scenario where they had the 4th, 5th, or 6th pick, I think, it's potentially interesting. But yeah, bucket getter, kind of just a dynamic, shot creating guy. And, for a team like San Antonio, a team with defensive structure, and just a team with good coaching at the end of the day, I think that is important, especially you talk about Trey Johnson, a guy like Ace too. Like you really need like these bucket getting archetypes to have structure and knowing how the game is played and just kind of embracing more of a role where they can kind of flourish, but also, develop and make and play honestly the right way. But yeah, Trey Johnson, very intriguing prospect for any team looking for, instant offense or secondary ball handling.
Yeah, and I've seen some of the comparisons. The shooting numbers in comparison to Ace are undeniably better in Trey Johnson's favor, but I just buy how much more Ace like cares and buys in and has a motor on him than I ever really felt watching Trey. And again, the talent is there. I'm not denying it, but he's pretty low on my list for my Sixers specific big board for how I'd like to see him. Now, a couple other guys to hit on. Khan, we mentioned Jeremiah Fears. Saw some love for him in the chat earlier. Shout out to you guys for hanging once again. I like Jeremiah Fears. He's not a guy that I think fits the finished product conversation whatsoever. I am happy he's stuck in the draft because I did see a little bit of that teasing that he might go back to school. He's 18 years old, one of the youngest players in this draft here, and a guy that like I do believe in time will grow into things. There's a legitimate pop when he gets downhill, taking guys off the dribble. He did not shoot the ball well this year, and that's going to be something. I think to be fair to him, watching some of those games, it was a lot of Jeremiah Fears go figure it out on offense, and I think like situationally was not ideal to show what he can truly do. I believe he switched up or moved up reclassified is the word I'm looking for to even get into college last year. So a guy that like you're taking for the long haul there. I wouldn't touch Fears at 3 for sure. If we're moving down, I can kind of see a world, but he's only 6'2". I don't love the mix with Maxey and McCain there. I like him more as an overall prospect than I like him for the Sixers for sure. Any thoughts on Fears?
He's a guy who I definitely need to do more. I'm not as familiar, but based off what you said and based off the things I've seen here and there, I think if they were in like that lottery range, I think I'd definitely go Khan or Trey Johnson or a guy of that caliber, VJ over Jeremiah Fears because I think he is a little bit undersized as well. Correct me if I'm wrong. And I think
Yeah.
he kind of fits that same archetype as Maxi a little bit in terms of the scoring, not and yeah, but overall, I definitely think there is more intriguing prospects like we've established than Jeremiah Fears, especially for the Sixers.
Yeah, and we do have plenty of time to draft to kind of cement these takes, so no sweat that I am kind of throwing you on the spot here. I will riff through a couple more here. You mentioned Malawak. I love Malawak, man, and that is a guy that I think if the Sixers were a little bit lower in their end of where their pick range could have ended, if we were talking about the 5th or the 6th pick, I very much would have been talking myself into this guy. He kind of following a similar pathway from Joel is obviously a guy that picked up basketball late, started when he was 16. He is real deal 7 foot, does have athleticism, and I do see something as far as touch there. Shot over 70% from the free throw line, which is really appealing to me. And I've kind of used this phrase a couple times with him. It almost feels like his approach to this game, approach to basketball at this point, is like inquisitive. He's still figuring out all the things that he can do. I'm buying him. Now, I won't lie, the Houston game where Duke was ultimately eliminated there did scare me, coming up with 0 rebounds as a 7 foot, the big man, the biggest guy on the floor when Houston did not have a dude over 6'7". That was concerning, but to be fair to him, that's what Houston does. They attack the glass. They make it impossible for other guys to get rebounds there. And like also to his credit, he still was involved in a lot of tip outs and kind of being in the mix there. He wasn't a 0 factor in that game, even if he did walk away with 0 rebounds. So you seem to be a little bit of a Malawak believer there. Is that fair to classify you? Anything you want to elaborate there?
No, definitely. I think if you're talking more fit on the Sixers, I think if you had Malawat, like if the Sixers traded down, and you had a combination of Malawat and a Dembona, like that is just perfect, especially in an era post Embiid, because he is 7 foot with just crazy athleticism that Joel Embiid, unfortunately, because of injuries, has never really possessed. And I think if you have that, great lob threat, I think it kind of has a little bit of an underrated hook shot.
Yeah.
Obviously, a great help defender, just rim protector, just a guy with really great upside, kind of a raw skill set, but definitely, I feel like it's not to say he's a sure thing, but like he has the skill set to really be effective, especially in today's NBA. It's all about pace because I can just imagine him, pick and rolls, transition lobs. Just he is definitely the ideal, like prototypical modern center. So yeah, definitely him. I think I mentioned him a few times. Colin Murray Boyles, definitely interesting option. I think if you talk about front court guys in terms of their fit with Joel Embiid, I think 3 point shot aside, there's definitely potential there because he's a great connective passer, one of the best defensive forwards in this draft. And I think he could definitely, make a team better, especially a contending team. He's one of those guys who could really contribute now in a way too. So
I hate to do this to you, Jacob, but I think I'm out on Colin completely. And
really,
I mean, to me, he's a 6'6" big man that shoots 23% from three. And it's kind of surprising. Like, you're not the only one that I've seen said that by any means. I've seen plenty of people whose opinion I respect, believing like, and to be fair to him, he was in a tough situation down at South Carolina. And like, there was a lot of factors that played into this. I just don't fully see like the NBA fit for him, and I struggle. And I'm not going to shut the book on this guy. We still got plenty of time, and I will get in the takes. Maybe I change my mind, get reading up to the draft, but that is sort of my early feel on him.
no, that's totally fair. I just think there is a real niche of player for him. I kind of think of, you know, Aaron Gordon. I think we talk about him a lot, but he really is what every modern power forward should be. Obviously, the shooting will definitely need to improve, but I think just the defensive upside and his feel for the game is enough to kind of carve out him not a big starting role in his first few years because obviously the jump shot will really depend on his trajectory, but just his feel for the game, his defensive versatility. I think there really is a place for him in the NBA. But like you said, it really is all about the 3 point shot because especially we've seen in these past few playoffs, like if you lack in one skill, you're going to get played off the floor. So that's just essential. But yeah, I could definitely see the skepticism from him.
Yeah, and the last guy I kind of want to hit on here before we bring it back to fully Sixer centric, Derek Queen out of Maryland is another really interesting prospect to me. I was a little bit of a skeptic of his from the stance of I feared that he could fall in that tweener category in a bad way, that he was not quite big enough to be a true big man, and I did not really trust him on the perimeter enough as a defender. He still has a lot of work to do in a defender in general here. He's a smart player. He's a really good passer. He's got some legitimate shooting touch, a really fun personality there. He's got some pretty cool connections. My take is I do think the Wizards take him at 6. Bub Carrington was already pretty vocal how they grew up in the same neighborhood, 3 houses down from each other. I have known each other their whole life there, and he is a local kid towards the DC area there. Do you have any feelings on Derek Queen? And to kind of make this more of a Sixers specific question here, between Maluak and Queen, we know Joel Embiid, and obviously that is the biggest question mark regarding the future of the franchise. How important is it to you, all things equal, to begin to keep in mind the clock on Joel Embiid is winding down from a draft perspective? Is that something that you're beginning to prioritize at this stage in the game?
I think definitely. I think that's why my whole approach has been, take the best guy available because you want that talent. But Derek Queen is an interesting guy because we see the offensive upside, the variety. I think just for the Sixers, I think Baloch would be a better fit just because you'll have McCain and Maxey. And I feel like the Sixers at this point, considering all we've been through with Joel Embiid, just needs a guy who will play all 82 games, defend at a high level, and just roll to the rim and just get stuff done. So I think in terms of that, I would go Malawatch. But I think with Derek Queen especially, I think you need a team with defensive structure. Like I think the Wizards would be a great fit because
Yeah.
you have Sar
Yeah.
backing him up and being that anchor. And yeah, just overall, I think great upside. Defense scares me a little bit. I I don't really know if his role is a center or power forward yet,
Right.
which also is another interesting question mark. But I think there definitely is a place for him in this league too, for sure.
Yeah, I do as well, for sure. And he's a guy I think I like more as an overall talent than I do for the Sixers. He falls in that category. And he did measure very well at the combine as well. He turned out bigger. He grew a couple inches in college, I think 2 inches there, which is a great sign that those things do kind of matter. A guy like Jace Richardson, like a concern to me that I wanted to look at this guy as a little bit of could play some two guard. He's listed at 6'3", measuring at 6 foot even there. Those are kind of things that when we get to the NBA level, that stuff does stand out. Now, granted, they are who they are as players. Nobody should be writing guys off based on what their height comes in or what these combine. I know there will be some overreactions to those as things go forward here. But I guess to phrase this a little bit more philosophically and bring this back to the Sixers overall, the Joel Embiid stuff is ultimately the biggest question mark for the franchise on a lot of levels here. Now, they're committed to him financially. I don't see a world where this team ever attempts to move him until that, I guess, the situation is broken from Joel Embiid's perspective. I think we're at the stage in the game where until Joel waves that white flag and says, I want out, as we're seeing up in Milwaukee with Giannis for a myriad of reasons there, I don't think that that happens. And on the other side of the equation, it always takes two to tango when making a trade. And I don't think there are too many teams around the league lining up to commit to paying him $70 million in 2029. Now, to bring it back to this current Sixers team, I guess the problem being with that is how do you approach this season? Now, he did get a surgery. We have not got much of an update there, and I don't really expect to going up to training camp. Do you believe from day one we will get the Joel Embiid, and what is your level of hope that he is still in there at this point in the game?
I think for how they should approach the season, I'm just going to be completely blunt. They can't bullshit around and do this like flexibility that they've done for the last few seasons. Either Joel Embiid's healthy or not, you have to go all in the season because you've spent the last two seasons, whether purposefully or not, saving this flexibility, trying to get under the apron, so stock assets, get a draft pick, whatever. So this season it really all has come together, and they really have to make a playoff push because Joel Embiid, even Paul George, you don't know how many good, better years you're going to get because even if I'm sorry, not Paul George, even Joel Embiid does fall from his MVP level, who's to say it's not going to be even worse in 26, 27?
Yeah.
Like, you really just have to savor as much as you possibly can. I do want to point out an interesting thing Daryl Morey also said on the Ricky last week. He said something along the lines of if Joel Embiid comes back, he'll want to do it at MVP form, which I don't want to overthink that quote, but the if part was interesting, especially because we know Embiid's mindset that he wants to be the best. And if he cannot be at that level, then what does that mean for his NBA career? I don't want to go too far on that because I think that's a little bit overreaching, but I think it's definitely interesting wording by Daryl there.
Yeah, and my take on watching that is I think he kind of phrased that as like we're not going to see Joel Embiid do like a Dwight Howard kind of thing where he obviously was this superior talent, this guy that was the best center in the league by a comfortable margin during his peak there, and then by the end of his career was just a rotational big man that stuck around and had his fun. Obviously, we had him for a season here in Philadelphia, did his thing with the Lakers, and he did just become a backup center. That is not going to be Joel Embiid. That I think once the end is in sight, Joel Embiid will be out. Now, with that being said, I believe he's got $212 million or something in that range to keep trying at this point in the game, and I do believe that that is exactly how things played out. Now, from the Sixers' perspective here, where I think the hierarchy of this team shifts is it's no longer full-centric Joel Embiid ball, and what I mean by that is we see the night and day difference for the games in which he's there and the games in which he's not for stylistically how this team does play. I do think moving forward, the motor, the engine of this Sixers team, it's got to be built around Jared McCain, Tyrese Maxey, Paul George, hopefully, if we can get that return season. And I do think he will straight up just be better than was the case last year. I think there was a lot going on health-wise, off the court, and everything else kind of falling apart around him. That he was brought in to be Robin. He was not brought here to be Batman, and his Batman was not there for most of the season there. So I think Paul George, it was a rough season last year, but that is kind of the core. And of course, whoever this third pick is. So Embiid, when he's there, is still going to be one of the most elite players in the NBA if his body is capable of that. But I do think conceptually, the Sixers should look at this as we need to be able to generate offense and be a high-level basketball team, whether or not he's here or not. Do you think that is fair, or do you think, at the end of the day, he is still the MVP?
I think it's because you kind of saw it last season when Embiid didn't play. I mean, it's generally been the case, even with Doc Rivers. They play so much faster and they play more aggressive defensively. And I think Embiid just does. You have to play to Embiid. Like, Embiid is not a guy. Like, it's not the Showtime Lakers. Embiid is not going to be a guy who suddenly turns into this rim running, lobbing the transition, swatting shots, high energy guy. He's a guy that you build a post centric offense. I think that was the big issue last season, especially offensively with the big three, is that there was no variety. It was very stale. It was very free flowing, but not in a good way, like isolation heavy,
Mhm.
free flowing. And I think that's definitely going to be something that they have to work around. I hope Nick Nurse, as we speak, is designing more concepts for that. But yeah, I think I would love to see. I feel like we've been saying this Jesus Christ, for the last like 5 years. I would love to see Embiid hone in and more of a decoy, more of a DHO playmaking guy, especially because it will just alleviate pressure from him. And if Jared McCain's ascension is legit, you'll have McCain, Maxey, and George kind of take the pressure off of him and allow him to kind of take more of a laid back role where he won't have to score 35 just for them to have a chance. And I think that's exactly what we said last July, and here we are again saying the exact same thing. But no, I think the biggest thing for him is he just cannot have an insane usage rate like he did in 23, 24, or the last few seasons before that. Embiid, and I'm sorry, not Embiid, Maxey and George need to really step up because, if we're being honest, they didn't at all. Like, you can blame chemistry, you can blame injuries, whatever. When the Sixers needed them consistently, they were not there. And you said George wasn't Batman. He was barely Green Lantern last season.
Alfred,
100%.
maybe. Yeah.
It's fair, but no, we need Paul George to return to maybe a 19, 20 point per game scorer. We need Maxey to make that playmaking leap that he didn't really make last season. Not 100% his fault, but also there were stretches of games where he just played straight up hero ball, and they need Jared McCain's ascension to be legit, which we both believe it is. So those things happen, plus a third overall pick, resigning Quentin Grimes, filling out the bench. I think it'll be it should be a much better year than this year.
They absolutely have to go for it this year. And just to reinforce this point, sort of the last thing before we get ready to wrap up here, look around the Eastern Conference, my friends. The Boston Celtics, Jason Tatum, very unfortunate. Do hope a speedy and recovery, and feel awful that happened. But that not only rules Jason Tatum out for a significant portion of next year, but it also brings some significant questions for what do you do this offseason. Their cap situation, really brutal. And you're not going to be spending that if your star player is not available. There will be some significant changes in that Celtics organization. The Milwaukee Bucks, I think there is almost a 0% chance that Giannis is in a Bucks uniform at the start of next season. Who should scare this team in the Eastern Conference if they can play their peak? Now, I get that it's a big if with the health and all these things. There are variables with this Sixers team that we have to acknowledge as well. The Cavaliers are a team that we sort of saw these flaws in the playoffs kind of come to full fruition there, and they've dealt with some injuries as well. But my point being here, the Eastern Conference is wide open next year if this team can execute and play to the peak of their abilities. That has to be the full focus. So I am locked in on making that happen. We do have a little bit of positivity to build off with this third overall draft pick. So before we sign off here, just to kind of give your top three for that 3 pick, would it be Ace Bailey, VJ Edgecombe, and do you have a guy that you would lock in as your third, or is it a clear cut those top 2 for you right now?
If Dylan Harper's taken by the Spurs, it's definitely Ace or VJ, and I would go Ace. And before we end this, I would like to say I saw a really good video by Hoops and like to summarizes his game perfectly. And I think if Ace were to be a Sixer, I think the best way to set him up is to just let him work off the ball because he's shown he can do that. Just letting him, running off ball actions for him, getting him spot up threes, getting him, lanes to cut from the back door. So that would be the best way to activate him. And hopefully the shot creation will develop over time. We'll just utilize him off the ball. And I was glad you brought up the playoffs because I did want to, kind of give my spiel on the Eastern Conference.
Sure.
And I think Boston, it's very interesting because obviously they're very expensive. Jason Tatum's out with an Achilles injury. I mean, he got surgery today, which is good for Boston and for him. So I don't know if he'll be out if they do make the playoffs next season, but I think it's a really interesting period because you look at Drew Holiday, he's on a massive contract. Kristaps Porzingis, he's been great when he's healthy, but he hasn't really been too reliable. So you have to really think about those guys. And if you're moving them, I think Milwaukee's done. Like you said, Dame's going to be out for the entire year.
Yep.
We don't know if Giannis is going to be in the Bucks uniform. I think the really only real threats for the Sixers next season are the Knicks and the Cavs, who have been extremely disappointing. And I think we really did count out all of us, not even us, just the entire media in general. We counted out the Pacers, and they have proven that they are constructed for the postseason. They are ready, and they are really Thunder, the Pacers. They are the blueprint of what a basketball team in 2025 should be: ball movement, pace, defense, versatility, wing talent, and just everything. And so I really do want to shout out the Pacers. So yeah, those are definitely the 3 teams that should strike the most fear in the Sixers next season. I don't know how much better Orlando gets. I think Detroit's definitely going to get better with Jaden Ivey. Really, I'm very interested with Ivy to see what their ceiling will be next season. But yeah, I think the big ones though are obviously Cleveland, Indiana, and New York.
Yep, and it all starts internal, as we kind of know is the case this season. All of the Sixers issue, it was self-inflicted and I guess injury brought on, if we want to be nice about it here. So the lesson can't just be let's run it back and let's hope for some better injury luck. There does have to be some legitimate changes stylistically, the way they play and all these things. But the future is much brighter for this Sixers team than it was this time yesterday. So, well, I guess a little bit earlier than this time yesterday. But the point being here, we have a third pick. We have life in this franchise. I am leading the race for ace. I will be diving through each of these prospects and going through the pros and cons. So make sure you guys are stay tapped in to us here on Sixers Digest. Once again, do remind you guys to make sure you are subscribing. At this point in time, 61.6% of you guys watching these videos have not subscribed just yet. So the better days are here. We're going to be all over from start to finish this summer. Some big changes, and I do believe this team will be back in the contention category. So, Jacob, before we sign off, any other things that you want to plug? I know you just put out an awesome article talking about the trade options and things like that. What else you got cooking these days?
I think the next thing for me is I'm definitely going to do deep dives, articles on Ace Bailey, VJ, Dylan Harper, Con Kniffel, Trey Johnson, just a bunch of guys in that early lottery range. So the next episode, I'll have much more information, much more different angles that we can talk about with their ceilings and their just fit with the Sixers in general. So yeah, just pumping out a bunch of draft lottery, draft content. Looking forward to actually having stuff to actually talk about.
Absolutely. So yeah, we did live through the dark times to have a chance at this. A huge day for the Sixers yesterday. So appreciate you guys for
No more
tapping in.
Colin Castleton hoops.
And no more Colin Castle and hoops. Shout out to Alex Reese, wherever he is out there, and the rest of the 10 Commanders. But there are better days ahead. So appreciate each one of you guys watching. Once again, we will be all over the place this summer and leading up to the regular season. We still got plenty of time to the draft. As I mentioned, we will be doing plenty of breakdowns here on this channel. So make sure to stay tuned for those. And we will be back talking to you next time. Peace.